Richard Pryor, one of the most legendary comedians in history, lived a life just as outrageous and unpredictable as the jokes he told on stage. While his comedic genius captivated millions, behind the scenes, Pryor's personal life was a dizzying whirlwind of love, lust, heartbreak, and scandal. Over the course of his life, Pryor was married 7 times to 5 different women, with 2 of those marriages being remarriages after bitter breakups. But it wasn't just his marriages that made headlines. Pryor's list of hookups and secret affairs included some of the most famous and beautiful women in Hollywood. One of his most high-profile and passionate relationships was with Pam Grier, the stunning and fierce actress known for her roles in 70s blaxploitation films. Their love story was intense, but it ended in heartbreak when Grier discovered the destructive impact of Pryor's rampant drug use. She later revealed in her autobiography that Pryor's drug habits were so severe they even physically affected her health. Beyond Grier, Pryor was rumored to have had a romantic involvement with Debbie Allen, the talented actress, dancer, and choreographer best known for her work on Fame. Though details were kept quiet at the time, whispers of their brief yet fiery romance circulated throughout Hollywood's inner circles. The tangled web continued with Margot Kidder, the vivacious star of the Superman films. Pryor and Kidder's affair was said to be electric, fueled by a mutual love of partying and living life on the edge. Their bond was brief, but intense enough to make it into Hollywood gossip columns. Pryor also had a known relationship with Kip Hamilton, a talented actress and the sister-in-law of comedian and actress Carol Burnett. Their romance, while not as heavily publicized as some of his other affairs, still added another chapter to Pryor's never-ending saga of love and loss. These relationships only scratched the surface of his private escapades. Pryor frequently moved through Hollywood's glitzy scene, where sex, drugs, and chaotic passion flowed freely. His romantic exploits weren't always joyful. They often mirrored the turbulence and darkness that lurked just beneath his comic brilliance. As much as Richard Pryor's career sparkled with success, his private life was marred by scandal, addiction, and deep personal demons. Perhaps the most notorious event that exposed his inner turmoil was the infamous night in 1980 when Pryor, while freebasing cocaine, accidentally set himself on fire and ran down the street, suffering life-threatening burns. The terrifying incident symbolized how far Pryor had spiraled under the weight of fame, addiction, and emotional chaos. Adding to the layers of controversy were long-circulating rumors about Pryor's bisexual experiences. In 2018, legendary producer Quincy Jones and Pryor's widow Jennifer Lee Pryor confirmed that Richard had indeed engaged in relationships with men, including a reported affair with none other than Hollywood icon Marlon Brando. Pryor himself, ever the brutally honest comedian, had joked about his bisexuality on stage, although many at the time dismissed it as just part of his edgy act. Violence also haunted Pryor's relationships. Several of his ex-wives, whose names included Shelley Bonus, Deborah McGuire, Flynn Belaine, and Jennifer Lee Pryor, later spoke openly about the domestic abuse they suffered during his drug-fueled rages. His marriages often ended in bitter divorce battles, accusations, and sometimes terrifying stories of Pryor's darker side. Pryor's frequent run-ins with the law, ranging from drug charges to weapons offenses, painted a portrait of a man constantly battling his own self-destruction. Despite all this, Pryor never stopped chasing love. He wrote heartfelt love letters and poems to many of the women he adored, fragments of a softer side that rarely surfaced publicly. These handwritten letters were so personal that many were later auctioned off as precious relics of the complicated man behind the public persona. Pryor was also infamous for attending and even hosting wild Hollywood sex parties, where all inhibitions were cast aside in favor of drugs, alcohol, and raw hedonism. Friends and insiders from that era often described him as a wild man, driven by an endless hunger for experience, connection, and oblivion. Richard Pryor lived like he performed, with brutal honesty, fearless energy, and often heartbreaking vulnerability, making his secret affairs, hookups, and scandals an unforgettable part of his mythic legacy. Beyond his public romances with women like Pam Grier, Debbie Allen, Margot Kidder, and Kip Hamilton, Richard Pryor's life was filled with countless secret liaisons, many of which unfolded behind the closed doors of Hollywood's most notorious underground parties. Pryor moved within an elite circle of stars who indulged in all-night drug-fueled gatherings, where sex, drugs, and reckless abandon ruled. Insiders from that time, including his widow Jennifer Lee Pryor, later revealed that Richard didn't just attend these parties, he hosted many of them himself. At these lavish and often chaotic events, Pryor's charisma attracted a constant stream of admirers: models, actresses, aspiring singers, many eager to experience the gravitational pull of one of the most electrifying performers of the era. One whispered rumor suggests Pryor had flings with rising stars and established icons who never wanted their names publicly attached to his. Some reports suggest Pryor had brief encounters with women like Una O'Neill, daughter of playwright Eugene O'Neill, and other well-known figures on the social scene, although these relationships were kept extremely private. Men were reportedly drawn to him too, captivated by his raw emotional honesty and unpredictable energy. His rumored sexual encounter with Marlon Brando became one of the most shocking revelations years later. But it wasn't necessarily unusual within the context of Pryor's life, where boundaries were often blurred under the influence of drugs and deep emotional pain. Richard's behavior at these parties was described as uninhibited. He would drink heavily, freebase cocaine, and then slip off with whoever caught his eye, often multiple partners in one night. The atmosphere was one of both glamour and decay, a perfect mirror of Pryor's soul. Behind every outrageous hookup or wild night lay a deep loneliness that Pryor never managed to conquer. Despite all the women he loved, from Shelley Bonus to Deborah Maguire to Flynn Belaine, Pryor confessed in his private writings that he often felt unworthy of true, lasting love. Trapped in a cycle of destruction he couldn't escape. As Richard Pryor aged, the pace of his love life hardly slowed. Even after facing near-death experiences, including the brutal 1980 fire incident and years of substance abuse that ravaged his health, Pryor continued to seek connection through intense and often chaotic and romantic encounters. His final marriage to Jennifer Lee Pryor, whom he married twice, was both loving and volatile, marked by deep affection but also explosive arguments. Jennifer later shared that even at his sickest, Pryor could still command attention with a wink, a joke, or a tender word. She also confirmed that Richard had no shame in admitting his bisexual experiences, stating he was proud of the life he had lived, mistakes and all. Throughout the 1970s and early 1980s, Richard's hookups weren't limited to stars and public figures. Background dancers, waitresses, singers, and even fans occasionally found themselves swept into Pryor's chaotic orbit. Though many of these relationships were short-lived, they sometimes left a lasting impact on him. In his later stand-up routines and private conversations, Pryor often reflected on the pain he caused those he loved, particularly women like Pam Grier, whose heart he broke but never forgot. Pam would remain in many ways the symbol of the one that got away, a rare woman who challenged Pryor and loved him deeply, but could not save him from himself.